I'm going to talk about a life of purpose, especially as the Holy Spirit leads us. And this lesson is going to be about the change that needs to occur in our thinking. Actions and purpose and what we ultimately live for are driven by how we think. The man who commits adultery errs in his thinking long before he errs in his actions, whereas the man who's never committed adultery in his mind would find physical adultery both repulsive and destructive. To truly live with God, whether on this earth or really anywhere, there must be a basic desire to be with God or around God. It will probably be easier for us to desire this once we're capable of meeting Him on a more personal basis after our physical bodies die. But if we have no desire for relationship with God and God's purpose in our life here, what makes us think that we will be excited about it in the next life? The story of the millennium in the book of Revelations, after the tribulation and before all of heaven really starts, shows us that people who live under the rule and reign of Christ don't necessarily want to live with Him, and will find it easy to switch over to the dark side when the opportunity presents itself. Living in the purpose and presence of God is a vital thing to learn for both this life and the life to come, because our thinking is going to be part of our eternal life. We are given a new body, but not new emotions or thoughts or personality. That would make us different people. I believe in many ways that this life is a preparation for the life to come, when we'll meet God face to face and continue in our walk with Him after our physical body has been replaced by one that doesn't age or deteriorate. If we're attached to this world, the life to come will be a difficult one for us, and living with God may be a difficult experience for us. So let's talk about changing our thinking and what this really means. We're going to start out at the beginning of the book of Romans chapter 1. We need to remember that these words are being given to Christians, and that the reason that he's speaking these things is to clarify to them that change needs to come for them to walk with God and be guided by His Spirit. He's not talking here to bad non-Christians in the world. He's talking to us. Paul is explaining what has happened to us that has corrupted our thinking, what has corrupted our real purpose, and this is what we must deal with. Our thinking must change in 4 important areas if we are to want to live in the purposes of God and walk with God in the Spirit to obtain these purposes. Our first problem is that we see something other than God in the order and complexity of the world around us. We don't understand that God is always trying to communicate with us. The second thing is we have come to see the physical and the desires of our physical bodies to be the most important thing to live for. Thirdly, we've allowed our minds to be changed further by the actions that we commit. And lastly, we approve of the wickedness in the world by doing nothing about it, doing it ourselves, and at times encouraging it or ignoring it or actively participating in it, sometimes in ways we don't understand. The first area of change that needs to occur is that we see something other than God in the order and complexity of the world around us. What this is really talking about is we don't understand that all that's been created was created to lead us into the purposes of God in relationship with Him. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. For although they knew God, they neither glorified Him as God, nor gave thanks to Him. But their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal man, and birds and animals and reptiles. What has really happened is that we've lost our ability to understand that God is an ever-present part of our everyday lives and constantly trying to communicate with us and reveal who He really is to us and those around us. Paul relates it to the area of creation. but in many other ways God is communicating with us. Instead, we have taken this communication and sought to understand it in terms of our power to change things. We have made ourselves the top of an evolutionary structure, when really we should be grateful for what God has made. We've made ourselves the most important thing, when really it's God. We should be amazed at our good fortune for having such a loving and wise God. Our dedication to other gods and other things are an indication that we're not truly grateful to the one God who created us and gives us all the other things of creation to enjoy and to teach us about his power and wisdom and nature. We've become fools instead of becoming more intelligent, and have become obsessed with the temporal and physical world that God created, with the intention of showing us how amazing his purpose for our life and relationship with him in the Spirit can be. Once we understand that everything around us was designed by him for us to experience him, it changes how I view my life and problems, how I view what God asks me to do, how I view other people who become a part of my life. It's no longer about me and what the world has to offer me. It's about tuning into what God is saying to me and what his purpose is for my life. Too many Christians are tuned in to the wrong things, and they fight against the voice of God guiding them because they don't understand how their lives should truly look or what is important and unimportant. Many times we find it hard to believe that God is even guiding me when the things that he asks us to do or to be involved in seem to have no positive effect on my well-being in the way that I would like to be helped. There are entire doctrines built around the idea that God will reward us with worldly things if we just serve him properly. While there's an element of truth in this, God's focus is not on making our lives physically prosperous. It is really focused on making us lovers of God and of relationship with the people around us. To God, real riches are comprised of these two things: relationship with him, relationship with people. When we become focused on something other than these things, we become darkened in our understanding, and our thinking becomes idolatrous and without eternal value, and our actions follow our thinking, so that we live outside of God's presence and purpose for my life, and use what we see around us for ourselves and for what we can get out of this life. People make up religions and gods to serve their own selfish desires and needs, and religion many times is used to obtain the things of this world that we view as important. Even man's killing and war are justified in the name of religion, when what God desires is for us to have relationship with each other under the common banner of membership in the family of God. The second problem in our thinking that needs to change is that we've come to see the physical and the desires of our physical bodies to be the most important thing to gratify. Romans 1:24-27 says, "Therefore God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity for the degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. Because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. Even their women exchanged natural relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, the men also abandoned natural relations with women, and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed indecent acts with other men, and received in themselves the due penalty for their perversion." This passage is talking about a further decline in our thinking, especially around the area of sexual immorality and gratifying our body's sinful desires. Sexual immorality is a powerful deterrent to living in the presence of God and desiring his purpose. It is an indication that we've rejected true and real love in our life, which is sacrificial and looks out for the well-being of another person. By its very nature, sexual immorality is corrupted love without commitment and based upon temporary attraction that is conditional and self-serving. God is love. So when we view love in this way, living in God's presence becomes very difficult, and wanting his purposes becomes difficult, because the kind of love that we expect from God in this intimate relationship with him is not what he's prepared to offer us, or is even able to offer us. He can't offer us sacrificial. He can't offer us the kind of love that we're looking for. many times. Our deeper problem is that we were all designed to need love and to live in the presence of love. So we will pursue the kind of love that we believe to be true love, even if it is corrupted and destroys me. When we experience God's love and what it is like to live in His presence, it may be an experience we find difficult to appreciate or feel comfortable with. We may not believe ourselves to be worthy of this love and seek to reject God before He rejects us, or like a child seek to test the limits of that love, or expect it to come to us in a different way. If we never find God's love for our life, we will pursue a corrupt love that will take me deeper and deeper into a perverted love that can only lead to futility and brokenness, and even further away from the living with the God who is real love and for His purposes in my life. The third area of change that needs to occur in our thinking has to do with the fact that we allow our minds to be changed by actions that we commit. Furthermore, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, He gave them over to a depraved mind, to do what ought not to be done. They have become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They are senseless, faithless, heartless, ruthless. There are certain actions that cement and feed the wrong kind of thinking in my life. The things listed here make pursuing God's purpose and living in the presence of God very difficult, because they strike out at real love and will reject the kind of love we will experience living in the presence of God. God's love and life are the exact opposite of these things. And our problem will not be that we will somehow be rejected by God if we have these problems in our life. It is that we will reject God and His purposes for our life. Our problem will be that these things in our life will reject any form of relationship with God, because of the way that relationship with God would threaten to help us and to change us, and because of how strange and opposite God's presence is and His purposes are to these things. It would make us very uncomfortable trying to live with someone so different than us. And the more that we continue in these things, the more accustomed to and normal they become to us. Love becomes a thing that seems evil. And when this happens, God's very nature, His love, makes us want to push Him away. This is why sexual immorality has become something that is good, especially in the world, like some kind of romantic, untamed love, and why Christians are being expected to tolerate various types of perversion, and when we cannot, we become intolerant bullies who must be silenced. It is also why abortion has become some sort of compassionate response to a mistake someone makes, and why music that glorifies the world and the wrong kind of love has become accepted in many Christian homes and families. We have become numbed by the world and by their actions, and we wonder why it's hard for us to hear God's voice and to be led by His purpose. The fourth and final area of change is that we begun to approve of the wickedness in the world by doing nothing about it. We do it ourselves and at times encourage it by ignoring it or even participating in it. Romans 1 verse 32 says, although they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue to do these very things, but also approve of those who practice them. Living in relationship with God and the purpose of God changes us to think and act like Him. We learn to love the things that He loves. But the same things happen to us as we live in the presence of the wrong things and people who commit acts that are wrong. If they come to influence us in a way that makes us agree with them, or makes us ignore and condone their actions, or maybe even agree with the things that they do, it's only a matter of time before we will not appreciate or love God's perspective, making it very difficult to walk in His purposes. The truth is that we typically do not want to be spending a lot of time with others who are always challenging our ideas, thinking, and actions. We must come to grips with the effect that sin and the world around us has on our thinking, and how much our thinking affects our ability to really live in relationship with God and walk in the purposes of God. This is the first principle of change that occurs in our life if we are to truly live the kind of amazing life that God has intended for us.